double tap, and it puts whatever you want on the screen.
What?
And you can just do different chats.
I'll tell you when I drop.
Maybe like 5 minutes. That's what we're here for. All right, now we gotta find a place to.
Pocket?
If we, yeah, we can, let's just put it right in your pocket. That'll work.
Okay.
So there's a couple of things. One, try and stand pretty, behind the computer.
Okay.
Try not to move around a lot because you'll go right into the
Image.
into the light. Right.
Okay.
So try and stand behind there. Plus, we're recording it.
Okay.
If somebody asks you questions, try and repeat it.
Okay.
This way, because we're recording it, we can
Right.
hear the questions.
Okay.
Other than that,
Do
you're
people
pretty
generally
good to go.
ask questions?
Yeah, Frank tends to answer a lot of questions, but at the end,
Oh, okay.
definitely try and, if anyone asks questions, feel free to answer it.
Okay.
And we'll get you the recordings afterwards, so we're good there. Try and keep it around 20 minutes. Try not
Okay.
to,
Yeah.
I'll
I want to take
probably-
my.
No, but I'll probably just raise my hand or something if we get closer to 20 minutes. So
I'm gonna just take my watch off.
Because everyone
Look
tends
at it.
like, oh no, I got this down, and then they go like a half hour. That's how it goes. So I'll just raise my hand. In the
Okay.
back.
Give me 5 minutes, like before the 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and if
yeah.
I'm short, is that okay
And
too?
when, I'll put like my hand up for 5. You have another 5. When you're
Okay.
at 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be perfect. It's
Okay.
just, we try and make it so it lets all the other artists get
Right,
aligned.
absolutely. Yeah. This is such a cool thing.
Yeah.
I just happened to have seen the email. It's like right at the deadline. I hadn't heard of projections, and it's a really has a nice vibe.
It's a really cool family
yeah,
we have here.
yeah. So a lot of the same people come every week?
Yep.
I mean, month? It's
Yeah.
monthly, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
And it's starting to grow. We're getting into a bigger space. We're starting to get some sponsors. So we're going to get a lot more eyes on your work, which is the whole point.
Great. No, it's very
All right,
cool.
so I'm going to head back there.
Okay.
Once we kill the lights, just give me a few minutes to set the camera up, and
Okay.
I'll give you a thumbs up.
Okay, great.
And then Frank will introduce you.
Okay. Hey, Margaret. I'm going to be first. Oh, I'm so glad we did that time. Hey, Lee. So good. Great to see you guys. Yeah. So, actually, that chair with the coat is my chair, so you can sit there. And those are friends of. See that chair with the coat on it that's empty? That's my chair. So you can sit there. Tom Donnelly.
Donnelly.
Oh, man.
D-O-N-L-E-Y.
Oh, close to my name.
I'm president of the chapter. So
Of the SMP chapter?
Yeah, ASMP New York.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
First name again?
Tom.
Oh, you're the person I've written before. Yes.
I
hope
knew
you're
your
not.
name. I knew your name.
I know that name
birds.
from
Yes,
somewhere.
I know.
Oh, really nice to meet you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So I'll do a little intro on ASMP and then
Okay.
I'll hand it over.
So should I sit down until you're? So you kick it off?
You can hang here, whatever you feel
Okay.
like.
All right.
I don't know when I think we're about to be.
Okay. So nice to meet you.
When in doubt. It's so funny across the room. The answer to your question is.
So I'll do the intro to you. No, I'm gonna start first. Okay. So I can be done. That's
Check
Am I on?
you're on. It's just a little staticky. I
Oh,
want to make sure it's connected properly. That should do it. That should do it. Maybe I'll
So
just
who
put
are
it
the
on.
hosts? The hosts. It said you are,
Me and Frank are the ones that kind of run the show,
and then.
and then it's an ASMP night, so they kind of sponsor the night.
Oh,
And I'm on
okay.
the board of directors there too, so I'm kind of
Of ASMP?
Yeah.
Oh,
so like
okay.
one leg on this and one leg on there, so
Okay.
kind of made both of those
And this is
happen.
Photo Shelter offices.
Yeah, Photo Shelter is hosting the space.
Oh, okay.
All right, you should be good to go. I'll give you a thumbs up. We can kill the lights.
You look so glamorous.
Oh, so do you. I didn't recognize you.
It's like, who's that girl there? Oh my God.
You ready, Cliff? So I want to thank everybody for coming to our big night that we share with ASMP New York, who sponsored the entire event, so we're really grateful for them. I want to acknowledge Photo Shelter always for giving us their space. Jeff Roberts is here from AIAP, American Photography, who's been helping us as well as far as sponsorship, B&H, Archive Magazine, Photo District News. We have a great lineup, which Tom will tell us about.
I know how to find my light. So first of all, I just want to say a couple things about ASMP. First of all, who is in ASMP here? Yes! So about half the crew. That's great. ASMP stands for the American Society of Media Photographers. It used to be called Magazine Photographers, if you guys remember what that technology was. But it was formed in 1944, and back then, if you were shooting for magazines, they owned your work and didn't give you credit. So in that space, people like Philip Halsman and others formed ASMP to advocate for photographers' rights, and we've been doing that ever since. And Tom Kennedy, who's our executive director, is advocating on Capitol Hill every week. And we are right now currently advocating for copyright small claims, a small claims copyright court, so that it's not a federal case when you want to take someone to court. And it will be for a certain amount, like I think it's under $30,000 level of suit. And for a fraction of the cost of what it would cost today. So that's been working for a couple of years, and it's interesting working with today's Congress, but it is still advancing. Aside from that, we have a lot of programs. We're all about raising the bar on the business of photography, and we have a lot of programs on the business. Next month, for example, April 28th, a man named Frank Mayo, who is somehow knows a little bit about the industry, is going to be leading his pricing and negotiating workshop, and it's a very intimate one, and it was a huge success last year, and so we're repeating it this year. And we have portfolio reviews, we have networking events, we're all over the place. For the first time, we're in APAD, which is the largest international art dealer of photography fair in the world, and that's happening the first week in April, and we'll have 15 photographers represented there. We just were in Art Aqua, which was part of the Art Basel group down in December. So we continue to push the envelope on what we can do for our members, how we can support our members, getting face-to-face with the market, etc. So I'm just going to leave it at that. There's a lot of information. Who's on the board of ASMP is here? There's Cliff, Cindy, myself. You can ask us for information, or any other ASMP member, and me, of course. You can ask me. And so tonight we have 3 photographers, and it's really nice because it's a varied mix. We have Donnelly Marks, and we have Tatiana Ailina, and we have William King. And they all have a little bit of different artistic expression, which is always the case, and hopefully. But it's Donnelly, you're more of a fine artist, right?
No, actually, this is...
No, I'm not. See, I'm not
That's
going to
okay.
say anything. I was just going to say your names, and that's all I'm going to do. Tell us about what it is that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi. Hi, I'm Donnelly Marks. I'm a New York-based photographer, and I wanted to thank Frank Mayo for hosting this and for Cliff for hosting us as well. I hadn't heard of projections, but I'm really excited to be part of it. As photographers and artists, we don't often get the opportunity to see each other's work or see what we're doing, so I'm excited to be part of this.
Thrilled to have you.
Thank you. I am actually a commercial photographer, but I've always had an interest in fine art. And to give you a little background, I studied fine art and photography in Pittsburgh and got my degree in fine art photography and sculpture. In 1980, I decided I was going to pursue a photography career, moved to New York City, and did what a lot of photographers do to get into the business, which is assisting, and it's like an apprenticeship, to learn the business from the ground up. And I started my own business around 1983, and I absolutely love photography. I love the magic of the darkroom. You take an image, you bring it into the darkroom, you see that image come up in the tray, and there's just something magical about it. I still love the feeling of that. And there's something that was exciting about you take the image, and that image could go a lot of different ways depending on how you cropped it, what the contrasts or tonalities were. And so that always has interested me in photography. About 15 to 18 years ago, I don't exactly know when, I had a client who said, "You have to shoot digital. Can you do that?" And I said, yes, though it was like learning. I think I put film on CDs. And so from that point, I transitioned over to digital. And it was really hard at first, but I feel the same way about Photoshop that I felt about the darkroom. Photoshop to me is a very painterly medium. It feels like the digital darkroom. There's a lot of to do with bringing the raw file into the application and then working on how I want to treat that file. I have been a commercial photographer for probably over 35 years. I have editorial clients, corporate clients, and people are pretty much the main thing. But if you're in business for a long time, you often shoot a lot of different things. Even though I have a professional business, I've always had my heart's always been in fine art. And I've kept a studio where I did fine art, still life photography, and assemblage. And so the assemblage was 3D. I just thought I'd take a step back and talk about the sculpture that I did was welded steel, and it was an additive process. I would take pieces of metal, and I didn't really have a conception of what the end piece was going to be. It was working on piece by piece building a 3D structure. And the assemblages that I'm going to show you tonight have a lot of that kind of additive process to them. So something happened, oops, I went the wrong way. Something happened about, I would say in the beginning of the year, where I was working on an image, and suddenly I had the idea of doing a photo assemblage where I take elements that I photograph, bring them into the application, and then build them. David Smith, who's a sculptor I really admire, talked a lot about James Joyce's use of flow of consciousness and wordplay, which is really important in collage. And I like that flow of consciousness. I don't always know what an image is going to be in the end, And so, for example, this image is, I was walking down the street and I saw a truck that had this beautiful white surface. It was matte and a beautiful deep green and grays and sharp images. And I was really just drawn to the abstract shapes on the truck. I didn't know what I was going to make out of it. I captured it and I put it in what I call my digital shelf. And so I have all kinds of materials that I keep in the digital shelf. And it's like my studio where I have 3D materials, and I will take them down and I can work on them and I can play with them and see what develops. And that's the way I worked on 3D collages, and that's the way I've been working on these two-dimensional collages. So this one, I was really attracted to the colors and the sharpness of the shapes, and I took the shapes into Photoshop. And one of the things that I love about Photoshop is, now that I've been doing it for 15 years or so, it's like, it feels like second nature. I really don't have to think about the tools. It's almost like, you know, driving a car or something. You can just grab for this tool or grab for that tool and, you know, let the ideas flow. And so there's the layering, the composting of images, compositing of images, fusing of images. You know, you can work with different tonalities. You can shift tones. And so I really enjoy that process. This was probably one of the first collages or assemblages that kicked off this project that I'm working on. And it was just a simple piece of paper. And so I took the piece of paper and I folded it. I tried some multiple exposures, and one of the things I do with these assemblages is I start with an object, such as a piece of paper, and I might photograph it 20, 25 different ways, because I don't know how I want to use it. It's just a raw material that I'm going to work with. And then I bring it into Photoshop and I play with it. I try seeing how they juxtapose together, what works, what doesn't work. And like perhaps a writer might work with words, where you have a word and you're building a sentence. You might move the word here or there, or modulate the word, or construct a sentence, and that sentence might not sound right, so you might change it to get a different kind of feeling. And that's very much how I feel like when I work on these pieces.
If I could just interrupt.
Oh, sure.
What makes you start? Like, what is the moment where I'm going to take this piece of paper, fold it, and get into my process? Is it just I wake up that morning and I'm going to do it?
I think that's a really great question. Frank asked, what is the starting point? What gets you, how do you start the process? Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because I think a lot of times I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do. And I think it's like, I'm just going to get to work. And exactly the way I worked on a three-dimensional piece, it's just go, get the materials, and just start moving things around. And don't try to correct or judge or censor, just let things happen. And so in this instance, I had a piece of paper. I was actually, I hate to say this, but I wasn't able to get to the studio. I was trapped at home. And so I had a clear plastic floor protector under my work desk that I thought, wow, that has a really great surface texture. And then I had some paper. And so I thought, wow, that really looks great against that orange surface. And then I brought in a light and started lighting it. And I worked the light, tried to figure out which way did I like the light best. Took some pictures and then started playing with them in Photoshop, and then it evolved into this.
So it was just a moment in time?
It was like, yeah.
You saw something and that inspired you, I'm doing something now.
Right, and I think a lot of times the ideas can be generated from the process. That I don't necessarily have an end point in mind. It's just taking the raw materials and working with them, and that can generate ideas. And I think that working commercially, as a lot of us photographers here do, that you have to go in a situation and assess it really quickly. You don't always have a lot of time to figure out where to light or where you're going to position things. You look at the colors, you look at the shapes, and then you put it together. And I think ideas happen from that process.
So you fall into a zone.
You fall into a zone, totally. Yeah, excellent. Yes, definitely fall into a zone. Thank you. And so this is a piece that I'm interested in, things that when I look at objects, they resonate to me. I like that piece of paper. I like that piece of metal. I like that plastic. I like the qualities about it. And sometimes it can be a wall. And so one of the elements here was a painted wall where I love the texture of the peeling paint. And so that peeling paint might feature in this piece, or it might feature in 10 pieces. It's just one of the raw materials that I'll use. And originally, I do a lot of, it was like cutting and pasting and putting together. And at one point, I felt this is done. And this had been a red picture at one point, not a blue picture. And I think it's interesting to bring the audience in to see one's work and get some feedback. And the person I showed this work to when it was red said, wow, that looks like that reminds me of meat. And it was like, meat? That was definitely not the feeling that I wanted to have. It looked like sort of like the top of a roast. And so I thought, and then I saw it as meat, so I didn't want that. And so I thought, I'm going to take it into Photoshop again. And the background had an atmosphere to me that felt like water, sky, other kinds of feelings. So I started playing with blues. And I think the image came across, it was stronger as a result of the input from the viewer. It was like, so keeping open to what people say might not change my mind, but sometimes it can strengthen pieces as well.
And how do you deal with somebody who comes in and becomes a distraction?
A distraction to the piece?
Yeah, as if like you're in the middle of figuring it out, and then there's an interruption.
No interruptions.
You're locked out.
Yeah, I'm locked out.
All right.
But if I did have an interruption, I think that's also a really good question, because I think that getting into the zone, as you call it, is really important. And I think that shifting gears as photographers, we might not be doing this 9 to 5 every day. And so that shift of the gear from the work mode to the art mode to the creative mode is something that's kind of hard to do. And it can be challenging. And I think that's why I think just setting aside a time to do something, whether I feel like it or not, is really important, because then one can start working and it helps one get into the zone. So this was, again, some paper that I found that I really liked the texture of. The shimmery sparkles is a fabric that I saw that I really liked. And that fabric can be diaphanous and part of the atmosphere, such as in this photograph, or it can be very present and in the foreground, as in this photograph. So that's the same fabric, but it takes on a different role depending on what it is I'm creating. And so as in my art studio with three-dimensional objects that I have on shelves that I can pull out and work with, I have what I call my digital shelf, where I can pull those materials and use them in different ways. Sometimes they don't work at all and I just throw hours of work away. And then sometimes things just come together magically, which I think people who are in music or writing, they have that same experience. So this was using a shiny piece of paper, and that was like in a ribbon, and I shot it stretched out, compressed, different kinds of shapes. I wasn't sure, again, how I was going to use it. I bring it in, and it's like working with it. I edited out what I felt like didn't have a lot of tension. I like the tension of this clustered mass of energy. And so I worked with that. Then I added some color. I tried different colors. I really liked the red. It seemed to, I'm thinking brains, I don't know, there. But then it needed an anchoring. And so I ended up putting paper from another photograph into this image, though I tried a number of different things. But that particular paper seemed to work and anchor the image for me. So another thing that I think is important is I have like an internal, talking about flow of consciousness? Stream of consciousness. So when I work, I often have an internal dialogue or a stream of consciousness going on in the background. And it's kind of interesting because I don't generally think about, I don't generally talk about what I do. And so when I knew I was going to be talking about these images, I was like, what actually is going on, and what's going on inside my head? And what is the process? And so I realized that when I work, I often have a dialogue that's kind of like background music, you know, in the back of my head. And it can direct the creative decisions in certain ways. So it might be I'm thinking about feelings. It could be happiness, joy. It could be people. It could be an experience. It might be a musical reference. But whatever it is, I don't really edit it. I just kind of let it play while I'm working on the piece. And so this one, I was obviously pretty happy. I hope it looks like that. And I found a wind chime at a dollar store that had an iridescence to it that attracted me. And I thought, I'm going to use that at some point. And that's what the shapes are in there. And then the overlay, it's like painting. I felt like I wanted to throw paint across the canvas. And I used a piece of wire that I put into high contrast, took out the color, and then put my own color in, and then overlaid it onto the yellow. So I think that not censoring oneself and allowing that stream of consciousness to become part of the creative process is really important. And I think even professionally, I work like that. I go into a situation, there's a lot of pressure to perform fast. You don't always have time to make decisions. And so you have to trust yourself that you know the tools and you know the craft, and just sort of go with the flow and, you know, go after the image that you're trying to create. So this is a little bit, how am I on time? Okay. So this was an image, I like surrealism a little to a degree, and so this was using one of my images, which was an ear, and, you know, cloning it, creating a background, and superimposing. One thing is going into the studio. This was using some materials that are on my shelf, and I specifically went into my studio to photograph something. I liked the actual original photograph, but the purpose wasn't to take the photograph, it was to use it as an element to bring it in and work on it. And so that's this was a jar and some flat metal that I found. I stripped it of its color, added my own color, and came up with that. This is some gloves, and I liked a very minimal graphic look. The gloves appear in another collage later. This is a place, 30th Avenue subway. We had a really dirty, grotty subway, and all of a sudden it was new and beautiful. And so I thought I wanted to make it into one of my collages. So the bright shapes are the windows, there's a corrugated metal. I wanted a sense of motion in the picture. I want vibrant color. This is, again, is using some of the materials that starred before in different ways: paper, painted surface. This was a series of images I was working on of fabric and overlays in black and white.
So Natalie, when you work on these projects and you're working for a client, in some regards, right, how is that collaboration process for you? Because you're getting input from somebody else. How do you filter that and still keep your vision?
You mean in a commercial sense?
Right. If you're shooting something for someone else.
Well, I think that the client often they have a brand. And so my vision is trying to bring my sense of design with an awareness of their brand to the shoot. So I don't go and do Donnelly Marks pictures, but I have a Donnelly Marks filter. And I bring what I think is like, I have, you know, the people I shoot will hopefully have a lot of energy. They will be in an environment that looks visually appealing. So it's like I work with what their brand is and bring my sense of design into the shoot as a collaboration. I like high energy, and I like color, and I also like quiet. And this is, again, the paper, but I think another element that is really key for photographers is lighting. And I love lighting, commercial lighting, I love theatrical lighting, and this, the third element I would say in this was the light. And in these collages, I do a lot of experimentation with lighting. This was using two images that were going to stand alone, but neither of them seemed to work together. And I was like, hey, what if I put them together? And I liked how I like the contrasting colors. Oh, one thing I want to mention about these assemblages is I like the connection of the objects that I use that have a connection to the real world. It's not like they're abstract things that have no connection with reality. I feel like it gives another emotional level to have, you know, that looks like a piece of paper or that looks like metal. There's a connection to the real world that I think adds a depth to it. So as I'm wrapping up, I am a people photographer, and I love both people and still life, and I wanted to incorporate people in this project. So a few weeks ago, I asked some people to come to the studio and pose for me. I had no idea how I was going to be working on these, but again, this is sort of that stream of consciousness. I thought I'm going to take the pictures, I'm going to bring them into the application and just go to work and see what happens. And so it was fun. This was collaging. This was actually the test for the shoot, and I collaged different frames and colors.
So do you look at that as a creative challenge?
Yeah, definitely, because the challenge was I knew that I wanted to incorporate people, but I didn't know how it was going to work.
What inspired that, the original thought?
I would say if I had a specialty, it would be people. So I thought I want to incorporate people in this project. I like graphic design, and I thought it would be interesting to, plus I like kind of the human element, seeing faces and eyes, because then there's that level of human emotion connecting up with the photo, and I thought that would be an interesting design. And this is taking that first image and reworking it in a poster-like fashion. So this is my final slide. These were the gloves that I turned into a wing, and I thought it would be a good closing piece, but I am so excited to be here. It's been really terrific. Yeah. Oh.
Any questions to the audience?
Yes. Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah.
The first, I want to say thank you. You're a very talented person. I get enjoyment to see your
thank you.
work. It's really like art. I never think that it's maybe photo. And my question is interesting. You work with the people also, human beings, and with the material. As you say, you create something interesting. For you, what is give you more inspiration? What do you think consider to work more interesting? With the people or with material? What do you get more pleasure or inspiration work with the people or materials?
Oh, that's really interesting. I would say that I love working with people, but it's as what I was saying before about the process of the darkroom and that magical transformation. I think that that's the thing that I really love, and it can be either with people or still life. I love the magic of photography. I still feel like it's magical, and so that's the thing that I really am inspired by. Yeah.
Do you think with materials you have more ways to do interesting experiments?
No, I think people can be, there's a lot you can work. People, it could be more like theater, and there's like lots you can do with lighting and costume and things like that. So I think they can be equally expressive. Yeah.
Your work is really abstract, so I want to know, how do you know when you're done?
That's a really good question. I think that I get a feeling that I'm done. I feel like you just, it's like if you're playing a piece of music, you just get, you don't want to rework it too much. And I think that one can overwork it, and I've certainly overworked things, and then I throw it out. But
It's like a cutthroat kitchen vibe where you're like, after
No, I probably should. But I think there's, I think when one's in the creative field, you know, especially if you're a still life photographer, moving and adjusting, all of a sudden you get the sense that everything's where it should be and it's done. And maybe the writing process is similar to that. It sounds right, it feels right. Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any artists?
And you're done.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any artists, photographic or otherwise, who've inspired you?
Oh.
You seem to have lots of references.
They might not show up in these works, but I love Irving Penn and Richard Avedon. I love David Smith, Kurt Schwitters, Pablo Picasso. I just think he was very, you know, had that beginner's mind. And, you know, so I am influenced by a lot of, I love the visual world. So, yeah. Okay.
I was curious with your pieces, if to you, do they feel psychological or like there's an emotion attached to it? Hearing you speak about it, it was really interesting to hear about the materials and how you created it. But then seeing the pieces, it feels to me it feels like there's some kind of like really emotional, psychological things in happening in some of them. And I was curious if that's sort of my interpretation or.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm really glad you said that because when I'm working, I definitely, that's that stream of consciousness. I definitely have emotional things that I'm thinking about and decisions that I make that are being imparted into the piece. And so I'm really glad that comes across because it isn't just material. I definitely have emotions and thoughts, you know, that I probably don't even want to share, you know, of what's going into the piece. It might be the death of somebody, or it might be, could be a lot of different things, but that's definitely a component. I'm glad that comes across. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Did you end up, I'm assuming you end up displaying all these in one space somewhere in a gallery?
I haven't done anything with them. What I've done is I'm experimenting, printing on different materials. I'm printing on giant pieces of plastic. I'm printing on fabric. I'm printing on paper. I think that I really like the newness of the images, and so I might even like to experiment with silk screening. So I haven't really displayed. I've printed them and hung them in my studio so far. Yeah.
And when you did you find yourself wanting to change some of the colors or color palettes? Like, did they start communicating with each other a little bit, or?
I think that when you get into the process of printing, it's like it's a whole different medium. It's like, oh wow, that printer is flat. I need to, you know, punch up the contrast, or I need to lighten the darks. And I haven't seen a lot of them. Yes, I definitely think they do communicate with one another. And then there might be things I think, you know what, that was an early one. It's not as strong as this later one, and it might get edited out. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
We'll take a 10, 15-minute break. Please grab a beer, wine.
Where does this go?
That goes back.
Oh.
Great job.
Oh, thank you. That was so fun. I'm not used to being on that side of the camera.
No, you did great.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, I knew that. Sorry. Yeah.
You know, I came back to life, you know, and everything.
Yeah.
And you look great too. And how's Sam and everything?
He's doing really well. You know, he's like, it's slow recovery, but, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
I know you want to be involved.
Yeah, there's a couple more. You going to take it off?
No, I'll wait. But I didn't think you were up for anything like coming to the comedy show, but if
You know
are,
what? Tell me, when is it?
tomorrow night.
Oh, it's
at
tomorrow
7:30.
night. Oh, I thought it was May. Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night at
You know what? I
7:30.
probably should go. You know what? Can I let you know tonight when I get home? Check with Sam.
Whatever.
Yes.
Oh, I've been married for, I don't remember how long. My son's 27.
I have a daughter too, she's 32. But she's from another situation, let's put it like that. I was never married to her mother. And she died, and long story, but I'm happily...
Well, after I finish, next break I'll swap cards.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm totally relaxed. I forgot what I was going to say. I should be ready.
Oh, you're fine.
Yeah, I'll just look at you. I'll talk to Paul. I'll talk to Eric. I know so many people in the room. Deborah, my wife's here.
That's all you need. Just one.
And now I just hit the down button.
The right arrow.
The right arrow.
Yeah. The right arrow to move forward.
Oh, this is different than the way I play it. Okay, yeah. I don't know how. Okay, right arrow only.
So you can see the next.
That's the next frame. Okay. Whew.
No, the other way. Yeah. Thank you. You go to the bathroom? I didn't know. All right, how about it, ladies? William, you're on.
Okay, I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, good afternoon, ladies and or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a member of the ASMP, and I really enjoy being a member. I've gotten a lot out of, especially the portfolio reviews. It's allowed me to grow and make transitions within my own creative career. I want to thank Frank Mayo, and I definitely want to thank. I want to thank Clifford back there for helping me with this presentation. So I'm going to begin with I should tell you a little bit about myself. I started shooting when I was about 18 or 19. I was inspired by the Washington Post because I used to deliver papers when I was in high school, and I looked at the photographs all the time, and I saved my money, bought a camera. I attended Art Center College of Design in LA, and I was working for an advertising photographer from New York when he came out to LA, and then I decided, Peter Vaith, he did multiple exposures in camera, and I worked on about 4 different jobs with him out in Hollywood and San Diego and San Francisco. And then I decided to come to New York and went to work for him for about a year and a half. And then in about 1974, I started working for Art Kane, who was a creative director for Viva, and doing what they called love sets. They were period pieces. It was like shooting a sequence of still images for a film. They told the story. They were highly involved, highly stylized, and it took a long time to do because we made all our prints ourselves, and some of the prints were hand painted. So I'm just going to show you a few pieces of my background, but they're related to how I made a transition into digital. And because, let me just get started. Photographic illustration in, did I do that right? Where's the click? Forward. Didn't advance. It is the right arrow. It's not moving. Want me to try the down arrow? I hit that one. Okay.
You really mastered that digital space, huh?
Thanks. Photographic illustration and composite imagery. All right. This was a stock sale to Avon Books. It's called Stella Landry. The original was actually shot out in Hollywood, and it was Tri-X. It was a graphic arts print. I used Codolith as a developer. Used a Fog 4 Harrison filter to filter the negatives. So my negatives were like really flat. So I had to use Codolith to really bring back the contrast, and it would give me really rich velvety blacks. And then I would hand paint the final art.
What year?
I shot this one in Hollywood back in the late, maybe 73, 72, but I didn't sell it until the 80s, okay? This was for a cover for Art Direction magazine I was commissioned to do in the 80s, and it was about advertising, okay? The bottom line of advertising photography, and to me the bottom line was trying to find a good, honest rep. You know, that's like almost impossible to do.
Hey, wait a second.
And
wait a second. Sensitive area.
So this is like a composited image. It's hand painted. I did a lot of book covers for various publishing companies in New York. Louise Feely, I believe, was the art director on this. This was shot in my studio in my house that I have. I hand paint the final print. When I was really lucky, I got to work with Craig DeCamps, who used to be an art director over at RCA. And Craig was actually became a specialized type designer. So when I was really lucky, I got to work for him because he could really create a type that presented the image, and it didn't fight it, because there are some you'll see I took those out. There are art directors that use computer type, and it just destroys your artwork. This was called Castaigne City. Again, it's Craig DeCamps did the type. It was shot in New York City in a hotel off of Fifth Avenue around 56th Street, I believe. And it was published in this is the hardbound copy. It's published in hardbound and soft. And
if you could just give us a sense of how important it was to be an assistant. How that
the assistant. Are you kidding? Working for Peter Vaith, I worked for three different photographers. I got to work for Peter Vaith. I learned about bookkeeping. I learned about studio setup. I learned about location scouting. I learned about how to deal with clients. And then I got to work for Fred Ward first. Fred Ward was the Black Star photographer in Washington, D.C. He was shooting during the Vietnam War, he was shooting the protests. He had Peter, Paul, and Mary on stage on 100,000 people. I was the second assistant. I got to carry the film and take care of the film. I would have to label the film. I mean, that was pretty important back then, because there were only two of us working with him. And then Gregory Heisler. I got to work with Gregory Heisler for Life magazine on a shoot that he did Sugar Babies. Mickey Rooney and his Sugar Babies. It was on a large cyc, and that was an all-day shoot that was really a lot of fun.
So the assisting piece gave you what?
It gave me a foundation and a focus. It gave me confidence in myself in order to go forward as a freelance photographic illustrator, because I saw myself as a photographic illustrator back in the day, and that was because of Art Center. I mixed art and photography, even though I love photojournalism. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. This was one of the last jobs that CBS had done before it became Sony. I was asked to create the cover for Charlie Mingus's was a box cover for his CDs. And I was given a chrome that his wife had shot in a rehearsal hall that was pretty messy. So I had the labs make me a conversion negatives, several conversion negatives. I picked the best one that would work with the Codalith developer. And I made a series of prints one day of Charlie. They wanted me to use toners instead of hand painting because I was noted for hand painting. So I used Berg toners, and I was making prints one day and toning the next, and all the time listening to Charlie Mingus's music in a dark room. This went on for a week. Then I had to come up, during the second to third day, I had to come up with a background. So I went running around all over New York looking for backgrounds. I couldn't find anything. Finally, I looked at my set shop book, and there it was, in the set shop catalog. I don't think they even have it anymore. I saved that catalog. It was a sample of a background that they made, so I did a series of macro shots of it, and then I made a series of large prints, painted it. I used to print on super thin photographic matte paper made by Kodak, and I would cut it out. It would curl, so I had to flatten it, and then I would carefully paint around the edges and spot out any kind of highlights that didn't belong there, so it would sit and blend into the background. So I presented two variations to them, and they selected this one. It ended up winning 2 awards, a creative award from Art Direction magazine and a SIBA award that was submitted by Sony. Digital. Man in His Barge is a documentary. It's 20 images long. I photographed it. It's on the story about the Waterfront Museum in Red Hook, Brooklyn. And this was part of my thesis project for my master's degree at School of Visual Arts. I went back to school and got a master's so I could understand digital. Street portraits. That's my daughter. We were at the Umbrella Gallery at Harvey Stein's Umbrella Gallery. I took her to see his black and white exhibit because she's interested in black and white. And next door, there's a little gallery that sells and designs silver jewelry. So she went running in there, and I just stayed outside. And she just gravitated to the window, and I think I shot 2 frames. And there was a chain coming down in front of her face, and I retouched it out. I used Lightroom, Photoshop. I use noiseless to a degree. I shot this image when I was probably 19 years old. It's called Give Peace a Chance. I was at the University of Maryland, and it was after Martin Luther King was assassinated. Coretta Scott King stopped at major cities in the United States leading a candlestick march. There were about 100,000 people underneath the monument. So I knew that there was a street she had to walk down, and it was between the monument and the White House. So I went and stood in the middle of that street. I was the only person there except for a cop, and I just waited. I'm sorry. This is a little emotional. She came down that street with all these people behind her, and I got off 4 shots when she walked into the light. It's lit by street light and candlelight, and it's Ilford FP4, processed in Accufine, rated at 320. And it's won several awards. Okay, illustrated portraiture. Having going to SVA and having the background that I had, I needed to reinvent myself, and I was trying to figure out how to do that, so I went back to school. I started doing a series of portraits that were actually inspired by a painter, an Italian painter from 1494. He did a series of portraits of people in Italy. And I really loved the lighting. So the lighting in this, it's hard to tell. It's only one light. It's shot with, lit with a Profoto B2 on a 1x3 strip box, and it's at a 45-degree angle from the back of that's my daughter, Caitlin. And in the foreground, I have two silver reflectors that reflect the light back into her face. So the light wraps around. I shot her against a white background. I let go into gray. I masked out the background, and then I used flypaper textures. I recolorized the texture, also blew it out of focus, and that's how I create the background for this particular image.
So, you say you went back to school. Can you share a little bit, like, what inspired you? Were you afraid to do it?
Oh, no, no.
What
I had a major...
What was the impetus for doing that?
Well, the emphasis was that when, and I have two kids, and I really wanted to be a dad. So it was either be a dad or don't be a dad. So I decided to be a dad. I started designing educational programs for kids, and I worked for the Board of Ed. I was a special education technology teacher, and I was really good at it. But I lost my identity.
And school was going to get it back for you?
Yeah. I started attending the I3 lectures at the School of Visual Arts for about a year and a half, and that did it. I decided to go back to school, and I went through the School of Visual Arts Masters in Photographic Studies with Katrine Eisman and Thomas Ash. And that's where I learned how to do this. Uh-oh. Help. So what happens when you talk too much? Can you help?
Do you have video load? It might not be loaded on that side. Is your battery good?
No, the battery's on.
Oh,
no.
Power. Your power cable? Oh, you don't have a power cable. Okay. Stand by, folks.
At any rate, when I went to the classes at the SVA, I was sitting in on the I3 lectures, which is open to the public, and it really they would have one speaker a night, once every 2 weeks. And the speaker was a photographer or an art director or creative director that had been published. And it really just reinstilled what was in the back of my head that was floating around that I couldn't get to surface, because literally I had lost myself. I was really great at designing multimedia interactive programs for kids. But as a photographer, I lost the, not the spark, I just lost the ability to create on a digital realm, even though I was working in digital realm with multimedia interactive lessons. So I decided to go through the program, and I went through the program in 2014 to 2015, and I would do it again. It was really excellent. Katrine Eisman and Thomas Ash are just absolutely incredible. It gave me the ability to reconnect with my processes that I used to use in an analog realm. I also started attending the New York Photo Salon that Jay Mizell had started with several other photographers, and that was really interesting to get to meet Jay and listen to his stories and see his work. Okay, can I just go next? Oh, great. This series evolved from the portraits. This is Chris Lavish. It's the same. This is. I'm using 2 lights to light this. They're ProPhoto B2s. Again, I'm shooting with a white background. I'm letting it go gray. There's no light on it, and I'm masking out the background. I have an eye lighter down here to throw a reflection into his eye, and I take the flypaper background image that I want to use, and I also change it. I reorchestrate the tonality, the contrast, and the sharpness based on how I feel visually, how it works against the image that I'm working with. I did a series of Chris. He was just starting out. Now he's a fashionista. This is called Always Looking Forward. It's 1 light, 2 reflectors. Really simple. Again, it's using a ProPhoto B2 system. Oop, you fell out.
You're good.
This is Chris, again, left profile. The day after I shot this, I took a break, got out of the studio, came to the city, walked around the city. I have to do that to air my head out, and I also get creative. I find creativity in the streets. So I was walking by Grace Church, which I had done a book cover in years ago for Pantheon, and I looked at the doors, and the trees across the street from the church were moving like this, and the sun was coming through, and it was throwing this light pattern on the doors, and it was just moving, and I just went nuts. So the background was shot with a Sony 6300 with probably at the time I was using the 18 to 105. Chris was shot in the studio with the Nikon D800 24 to 105. And the hardest part of creating this image was, you have to look at his hair right here, was getting how clean that is around the loose ends of the hair and the masking. So that's really my biggest challenge, is getting to get it really clean, so it looks real. It is real. To me, it's got to feel real, and it's got to look real.
So you have to shoot still life?
Absolutely. I did a still life catalog for Concord watch, Movado watch. I got locked up in their vault for a week. That was fun. 4x5. Used to do a book.
You got to share a little bit about the vault.
Yeah, well, I had to set up and do a catalog for Movado watch. Harry Viola Advertising, Chuck Davidson hired me to do it. I used to do production stills for Chuck for his television commercials. And I used a cone, one of those plexiglass cones, to light the watches. We had it set up on one of the heavy Bogan tripods with an extension arm with a 4x5. And we left the camera that was there for a week because it took us a week to shoot it. And all this was film. It wasn't digital. So we really had to shoot. It was really a lot of work. And I think the hardest part was keeping track of all the exposures and how to have the film souped and tested so that everything would come out perfect. It did.
No, because you can tell from listening to you, there's a lot of still life elements to the details that you're speaking about.
Oh. Yeah, it's in there floating around in the back of my head somewhere. This is called the Profile. This won 3rd place in the Digital Pro Photo Contest, I think a couple of years ago. Now in it, there's like I made 3 levels. Again, Chris was photographed with the white background, so it goes into gray. I made a drop shadow. You can see it around, it's very faint. You can see it around between the fingers, under his arm over there. This is going to work. Right in here. And the background, it's a flypaper texture. I doubled the size of it, changed the color of it, changed the texture of it to play off his tattoos, the colors and texture of his tattoos. And again, it was what I was feeling when I do this. It's totally a visual thing to me, and I'm working on a Macintosh computer. I use Lightroom, Photoshop. On these, just Lightroom and Photoshop. I do all my own retouching, and the retouching on this took 3 days. It wasn't something I just banged out, because it literally takes 3 days.
The way you started working for Kane and film, only working with film, I mean, how hard was it, and how do you feel working so much with the computer now?
Oh, I love it. I love working with the computer. I mean, unfortunately, I end up spending more time on a computer than I do behind a camera because of the demands of the technique itself. It just takes a lot of patience and time, and usually I'll be working on more than one image at a time because my brain wants to jump to something else. I need a break, and usually a visual break means work on another image. So I usually work on 2 or 3 images and let it sit on the back burner. And it's better that way because then while I'm working on one thing, I get inspired for another image that's on the back burner. This is called avant-garde. When I was teaching junior high school, the girls would come in with their hairs in braids. I thought it was the greatest thing. I used to embarrass them. I didn't realize I was embarrassing them. I was complimenting them on how beautiful it looked. So we braided Chris's hair. It worked really well. And he has the look to carry it off. Again, the background, same thing. White background, drops into gray. I'm able to make the mask. A lot of retouching. Chris has a lot of demands on his face as far as he's got a lot of texture, he's got acne, he's got freckles. So it was a lot of retouching, and it took me 3 days to retouch. It's a lot of work. Now this I put in because it's totally different. It's one large light with the whiteboard underneath. The background's white, it drops into gray. Then I mask out the area in the glasses and everything around Chris. But the background was shot on my iPhone. I literally walked around the streets of New York City shooting with the iPhone. And I'm shooting abstract backgrounds or things that just visually excited me. And I used this app called Roll World. I was just experimenting with it, and it allows you to abstract the heck out of a background and make it into circles. And I made like 3 or 4 variations of this particular background of this building I think it was on Madison Avenue someplace or Fifth Avenue. And I ended up using it as a background. So I often will shoot pictures with, sometimes with the Fuji X100F, which is I think a 24 megapixel, you're using one, right? And I'll shoot with the Sony 42 megapixel or the 20 megapixel. I even shoot with the cell phone. When I get it into the computer, I'm able to utilize it in Photoshop. And if it doesn't work, I won't use it, but I try to make it work.
Was that the front of the building? Was that a flat building?
Yes, it was a flat building.
Okay,
and I completely, works great if you shoot, especially corners of buildings looking straight up with it.
Super wide angle lens gives you that?
No, it's cell phone.
Oh, the cell phone.
It's Roll World. The app is called Roll World.
Roll World.
Yeah.
So that's fast.
Yeah, it's real expensive. It's free. I think it's free. Channeling Magritte. Now this is a series I started not too long ago. I was in the container at Photoville, the SVA container, for about 3 hours, and I finished, and I was finished. So I went underneath the Brooklyn Bridge to chill, and fortunately I had my Sony A6300. The sun was setting, and these guys were coming upstream with these jet skis, and I just waited. I think I shot 2 to 3 shots, and that's it, because it was gone. It didn't bracket, just shot. And I had this feeling that I really want to put myself into my photograph, because I feel so much a part of my pictures when I shoot them. I don't know about you, but I get attached to them. So that thought, I kept it in the back of my mind, and I didn't do anything right away. I just kept shooting other backgrounds. Like this one, I was coming from a workshop at B&H that I was taking for portfolio development with David and Deborah back here. Deborah Gilbert's here. And I was going to the subway. I'm walking across the street by Penn Station, and I looked uptown, and I went, wow. So I ran back across the street, waited for the light to change, took out my camera, went back, stood in the middle of the street, and I shot 2 or 3 images looking up 7th Avenue. At that point, I started to get an idea of what to do with it. So, well, let me show, I'll get to that in a minute. Let me show you what I got with the rest of these. I was going to a gallery opening in Dumbo at the Klumpching Gallery, and I was early. So I went over to the promenade, and bingo, really wide shot. I had the Sony 6300. I think I had the 10 to 16 millimeter f4. I shot 2 frames, stitched them together in Photoshop. Today I just use Lightroom because I really like the stitching thing in Lightroom. They've improved it a lot. I stitched it together. I'm going to explain how I do this, but I want to go to the next frame. This was one of the pictures that I used in my portfolio development after I graduated from the master's program at B&H. I was doing a documentary of graffiti called Graffiti Soho for I think it was about 8 months. I was actually shooting this, and I was literally going around and around and around in Soho, and I would just shoot graffiti. But I realized I thought graffiti was ugly. People really liked what I was shooting, and I kept saying, why do they like the pictures? But I wanted this, it showed the transition that graffiti makes over time, and the graffiti that I ended up liking is the ones that are built up in layers. So I was waiting for this lady to walk through the frame. I didn't want anybody in the frame. I was on the other side of the street, freezing my butt off, waiting for her to clear out of the scene, and she just looked at me, and I hit the trigger. I hit the shutter. At that point, I realized what I wanted to, really that gelled with why I need to put myself in the picture. So I'm going to get to it. This is the salt marsh at the Nature Center. It's 4 frames stitched together. It was part of my midterm project, the background is anyway, that I was doing for Katrine Eisman for the Photoshop class. And I spent several weeks just shooting sunrises at this location. Everyone was different. I got lucky with this one. Okay, now I can talk about it. This is a recent one. That's me. I'm holding, it looks like my hands are in my pockets, but they're not. That's my son's jacket. The day I got up to go shoot the sunrise, I saw the crescent moon, and I said, that's never there. So the location's about 1.5 miles from my house. I hightailed it to the water's edge in the Nature Center, set up my tripod, and I usually get there before dawn, so it's dark. I set up the tripod, and I waited for dawn, and that's when I shot this gradation. And it's a straight shot. I didn't do anything to it. That's it. That's the way it looked. So then I went into the studio, and I started shooting myself in the studio. This is my setup. I need you probably want to see this. The background, Lastro Light 6x7 Manfrotto light modifier. I use it for 7 feet high and 6 feet wide. You can rotate it. I use 2 Calumet 750s. They're plugged in. They don't move while I'm shooting with this stuff. I don't take those on location because they're wired. I use 2 pop-up 5 by 7 foot black and white reflectors. I use a white or silver reflector depending on how much reflective quality I want to get in the detail of the fabric. Here's the phone, and there's my Sony. Now this works with any Sony camera, at least the ones I own, the A7R Mark II, the A7R Mark III, the A6300, and the ARX 10 Mark III. It'll work with any of those. And you use the Sony Play Memories app, so I can control the camera and I can see me, and I can tell myself how to move. I can direct myself. I'm really easy to work with, and I don't cost much. 750, this is the Calumet. It's a radio transmitter, so they talk to each other, they fire, no problem. The phone fires the camera. This is what I see through the phone. This is a picture of the phone itself, and when I'm trying to pose myself, this is what I'm looking at right here, which is this picture. And I'm trying to get the body attitude right for the scene that I want to put myself into. On the phone, I can control the f-stop, the shutter speed, but you don't push this button. This area here is the point of focus. So I select where I want the phone to focus or the camera to focus. And these shots I shot with the A7R Mark II with a 90mm macro lens, f2.8. And I just touch that, and it fires the camera. Now I come out in silhouette. This is another scene. I changed my wardrobe. This was Hudson River Sunset. It's, I think it's 5 frames stitched together, and I changed my hat and the jacket. And this is the last shot that I have up. It's called Shooting the Moon. Okay?
So with all this going back and forth to school, speak, if you could, speak to how that's been, how's that trip been for you to go back?
Well, I'll put it this way. Anything that I can imagine, back in the day when I was doing analog, if I could imagine it in my head, I could create it on film. And then in the end product, I could create it on paper. Today, I can do that digitally.
And
so,
you do that?
Yeah, between mastering the digital aspects of the software, I use Lightroom, I use Photoshop. I cheat because I get really tired of retouching. Sometimes I'll use, I always check the noise. I don't care what camera you have. I love shooting at high ISO, especially on the street, and I will often mix street photography with studio photography, and I get noise. So I use noiseless to varying degrees. Sometimes I'll blend black and white in with color because I want a different feel to the color. I want more of a black and white base to it. That it's in degrees. So sometimes I do that. It's a visual thing.
And you got all that knowledge from going back to school?
Yeah. That and spending a lot of time on the computer, a lot of time. James Porto. Okay, he was one of my teachers. His class was phenomenal. I mean, that's where I really learned about how to mix, to put another image into another image. I mean, it's just the mastering compositing and then retouching with Carrie Bean. I had a class with her, and I gotta say, I don't have the patience of a retoucher. I mean, I can't spend, Carrie Bean spends I don't know how long on retouching cosmetic. She does those big, huge billboards in the Javits Center. I mean, it's ridiculous how many hours she must spend, but she's got it down to a science, and she's really fast. She's such an incredible artist. I don't have that patience. I started to use Portrait Pro 12. I experimented with it. The bad thing about it, it has a tendency to change the face. So I found that I use it in varying degrees of percentage. Less is more.
Any questions?
Yes, Ian.
I think it was really good to see the book covers because for me, it's about concept. It's about basically having to illustrate something. And you even talked about yourself being a photographic illustrator. And so I'm just thinking. I mean, I know the technical stuff is really important, but I think the strength in your work that's consistent all the way through, when you talk about rediscovering yourself, is working with concepts, is illustrating concepts, is coming up with solutions.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. Conceptual concepts.
Visual solutions, right?
Visual solutions. That got some built into me at Art Center College of Design, but when I first started working in New York, when I was working for Peter Vaith, Barbara, the creative director at Avon Books, wanted to work with me. And she took me aside and had me come in, and for 3 weeks, she gave me a manuscript. She asked me to read it, draw a sequence of illustrative concepts, come back, discuss those concepts with her, and she would ask me why I wanted to use one concept over another, and then she said, I want you to create it. So then she gave me a PO, I went out and I created it photographically. But it all came from the concept, and it came from reading the manuscript. And whenever I did book covers, I always ask for the manuscript. Because if you get a description from an art director, you're getting, which I have nothing against art directors, but you're getting a synopsis, you're getting a short little description, and it's not what's in the book. And I was taught to read the book, read the manuscript.
So to be clear, you don't like reps, and you don't like that's the 2 points I'm going to get out of this chat. Any other questions for William? There you go.
Yeah.
Was there any money in that back then?
Yeah. The book jackets were really good. I mean, they paid fairly well. Besides book jackets, I was doing, I'm showing you a snapshot of my background. I did quite a bit of pharmaceutical advertising. I did a lot of book covers. I did some album cover work, and I did cosmetic. I did stuff for magazines. I did documentaries, all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, I worked for National Lampoon, and I had some crazy jobs there. I also I worked for Esquire magazine. I had one hell of a crazy job there. I had to document the stripper circuit in New York City during the 80s and when the mafia was being investigated, and I couldn't shoot in the clubs, and I had never been to a strip joint, and I had to get a letter from the Esquire, and so they said build a nightclub. So I designed. I wanted to go into architecture, so I built a nightclub in the studio.
Thank you. So we'll take a quick break and
Just go to the first slide.
That was wonderful. I give you that.
It was great.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I got emotional. Hi, Zeke. I saw you over there. I'm going to put this down. No, I didn't. I got emotional.
What's wrong with you were losing your voice? What's wrong with getting emotional?
Yeah, it sounded like it a little.
I thought you were losing your voice. I felt like you had to get some water.
Oh, this is my son, Zachary.
Hey.
Hi. Zachary, you see how this is great. You did? Where'd you eat?
Burger.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm trying not to. Where
Did you get some shots?
I videotaped the whole thing.
Oh gosh. Did you get some shots? Oh, thanks, Joel. I really appreciate it. Want a beer?
Yes.
Where are they? In the refrigerator.
I'm all in for the beer. It'll be my 4th one today.
Oh, God. I'm sorry. Thanks. I'm sorry. I got emotional. Got a little too emotional.
That's okay. Yeah, it's all right.
Excellent talk. Congratulations.
I don't want to trigger anything. I'm going to say because I'm just getting over it. No, but I
already shook your hand.
I know you already did.
It's so cute, like Liam said. You have
Sorry
this
about the
strong
comments.
background.
What comments?
I don't know.
Oh, I thought you did great.
I'll let you finish too.
Wonderful.
It's so
Thank
funny,
you, Eric.
like.
Oh, I gotta go get my cards. They're in my bag.
Before I lose you.
Okay, let me
I'll be
go.
presenting here next time.
Okay.
April 17th.
Here? Oh, great.
Using photography to make like a digital stuff.
Oh.
I thought that was excellent.
Thank you.
I thought that was excellent. I mean, you're totally unfamiliar with your work. It's extremely powerful, extremely professional, very resourceful, and something that I would never imagine.
Oh. Well, thank you. I just found it incredibly emotional. I had a hard time. But thank you.
Triggering things.
Right. Need distraction. Wow. Ah.
Really, really good. I'd love to talk some more. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome job, sir.
Oh,
no,
thank
speak from
you.
the heart. It's so much more natural.
Wow, you see what
I'm
happened?
so glad you did that.
I
I'm so
forgot
glad
I
you did
had
that.
this on.
I'm going to sleep this. Wow. I love the camera. My last victim.
Oh no. I should put this thing.
I'm gonna do that.
Yes, all right.
Let's do this. You ready? People just talk about your work.
All right.
That's all. Pretend now no one's even here. You're just talking about your work.
All right.
Beautiful. Everyone wants to know about this. I know there's some cool stories behind it. Just share them. That's all.
All right.
Just pretend like you're talking to your friend.
Mhm. Thank you so much.
One person in the room. You're explaining it to her. That's all you have to do.
Like for one person, it's easy.
That's it.
All right.
That's it. You can focus on just one person. What I do is like I kind of like don't focus on anything. I just kind of like I just like look out in the middle of the room, and then I just like I pretend like I'm talking to my best friend. That's it.
It's
and if they've never understood your work, explain it to them, and they'll love it. They're gonna love it.
Great. It could be even better if it's like the question answer, or it's better.
Better to just talk.
Just talk. All
Save
right.
the questions for later, because then they're gonna dictate to you what you're gonna say. Just talk about your work.
All right. I'll
Because
try.
there's gonna be
Thank you
so many
much.
cool stories, of course. So stand here.
Yes.
Right, and try to stand like behind the you're good like that.
Like that?
And then you're good. If anyone does ask a question, try to repeat it.
Yes.
And that's it. That's
All right.
All right? You're gonna be just fine. You're gonna be great.
I should stay here now. Yes.
Yeah, because if you move this way, you're not gonna be in the light.
Yes. And until the break will finish, I'll stay here, or I should be.
Oh no, we're gonna get started. We're gonna get started right now.
Oh, all right.
So just press this button to go to the next slide.
Oh my God.
You're perfect. Don't worry about it. You're gonna be good. I'll hold the full show up for you, Thomas.
If not, something else. Oh, sorry, hold on. I forgot about that. Thanks, Deb.
She's not nervous at all.
Yeah, so I want to say thank you so much for having me here. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone, to organize this wonderful event. I was amazed of work of previous photographer. Thank you so much to show me this and accepting my presentation and work that I preparing today. I'm sorry. Yes, so I would like to start with my probably more important project in my life that I did. It's a project about Lilliput circus in Russia that I travel in a different Russian city. I follow them and try to tell them story. So I'll more show the photo than speak about that. If you have some question, you can ask me. I shoot it with a middle format camera Mamiya 7. And I use sometimes some extra light, but not so much. There was a very interesting environment of old Union Soviet style, like hotel, like that one, with strange furniture, walls, and I don't think we can find much of these things in Russia even now already. And it's great we can capture some moment that probably never come back. these wonderful people that I was lucky to follow, they have a specialty that they are Lilliputian, small people, and they had an idea of circus to organize it together and show some performances, like we can see here. I shoot it about maybe 1 year and a half, so I wasn't come back in Moscow before I finished that. I was live in any place wherever they'll stay and share our life with these hotels and.
How long did you travel with them?
1 year and a half.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Can you
Yeah.
just speak to how you made that happen?
Yeah, it's all my projects. It was always pretty occasionally. I didn't plan it. Just something happened. Like I remember, director of this circus was contact me and spoke about some other projects, and then this idea came to me to propose her to follow the circus, and she was agree despite it was first time she was agree any photographer take pictures in the circus. I don't know, somehow she was agree, and I was very happy, and I'm really share them lives, and I felt me one of them some part, because I wake up that I saw the circus, I smell like all the circus on my dress, and after that it was a difficult period adaptate that I'm not there anymore, because I was so much inside of them life, and like
And any part of your own life, did you want to be in the circus yourself?
Not really, but it's always happened with me that any new project I start, I take too much in my own life. Once it's already finished, not so good. So I should be more attention, because I remember my first professor of photography spoke about distance we have to have with our subject. That's something I don't have, and yeah. And when I'm there, I'm like completely there, more than I can, and it's somehow good for photo, but sometimes it's not good for me, and maybe we should find balance for everything. And
How do you say it's not good? What happens
yeah,
to you?
I mean, if we make us to leave our project, we probably lose our own life, and probably if we could keep the distance, we could build our life different way, maybe better way than then yeah.
So
it's complicated, because it's one of the last project that I accept too much in my own life, and I don't think it probably was a good idea, but we don't have this project here.
Well, just
Yeah.
tell us that later.
Yes. So there is a wonderful woman. I love that they're very proud, they're very sure in themselves. They really feel amazing, but they told me it's only in a circus they can feel this way. Once they outside, they was insulted, and they had also difficult time, and that's why they start to be kind of arrogant, proud when they communicate with people, to feel them more sure in themselves, more.
And can you feel the difference when you're with them, when they're dressed and not dressed?
Not really, because the circus, it's kind of protection for them. Wherever they are, they in this house, on this and just if they go to the street, is different person, completely different. Only the house is changing them, make them proud, stars, creative, and.
And how quickly did it take you to notice that?
How
quickly did it take you to notice them being different within the circus bubble and outside?
Yeah, it was while I living with them. So sometimes we went outside for grocery, for whatever, and I saw how they expect people to have a wrong reaction to them. Even before it's happened, maybe it even wasn't happened, but they was expected, and they was very negative about people outside and Mephiant and.
And how did that make you feel?
I just follow and I observe it because when I work with something, I'm really much in it. So I try to understand, to feel what they feel, to see with them eyes, and because it could help me to show them in a better way if I understand what exactly they feel about everything inside, outside, and yeah. So this is the next project. Also, it was more short project also in Russia about the people who don't like to live in reality, modern world, who would like to come back to the past, to the very past, and they don't like even use any object of modern, like computer, iPhone, or whatever. All objects they use, they create by themselves, like the dress or anything like transportation or wherever they use, they prefer to make this with them hand, and they refuse to think they live in another time or another reality. Sorry, yeah, and. Yeah, yes, you would like to ask something?
I do.
Yeah. Yes, all right. There is a project also created in Russian about Russian transvestites, because in Russian the problem with here is very nice. In Paris also, I come from Paris actually, so and in Russian it's a little bit different, and it's very hard for the people who want to change themselves to woman or have different vision of them. I don't know, reality or, and these people have very difficult life. They was attacked on the street and could not find job. And we can see in them eyes, it's kind of craziness and kind of pain and a lot of things they want to share, but they cannot. They cannot just go to the street to go to a friend and share them. So for example, this guy, he lived with his mother, and only one happy moment in his life he have, when his mother go to grocery, he changed himself to her dress, and this moment he's really happy. And he told, yes, it's a problem for him to find job because he speak different, he look different, and sometimes it's difficult even to find friends or something. And it is a problem, I think, because it's not his fault. Yeah, he see life this way, and he really suffering. We can see these guys, they really suffering, and also it's became kind of dissonance with what he see himself and what he is in reality, because they was sure they look like a woman, like pretty woman, and actually that when he was preparing himself, he did it quickly in craziness, and it wasn't like we can see transvestite parade here, yes, or it was different. And I think it's also the part of not acceptance in Russia of this problem, and it's probably partly broke the psyche of the people, and so this guy.
How long ago was this project?
This was my diploma of my first photography school. I think it was maybe 6 months. Yes, maybe it wasn't the most long project. Will be the last one. About, yeah. It wasn't, but this project had a lot exhibition and the most publication in Russian. It's very strange because I traveled in Russian. Like just now, we watched with my friend one of article about exposition in the museum of this photo project, and people was about to throw that out in some little city of Russia. They come, television come, and they was like shocked that they find a picture of this project, and they was make a big scandal, and yeah, one of museum had this experience. But I was surprised that in Russian it was published most than in Europe where I lived before or wherever. Maybe it's touch in some way, I don't know, but I was surprised that they published it in Russian, not in other country. So there is also like a story of each person. Like I told you, first story. This guy, he lived with a woman who prostitution and her little son there. This guy, he got married, and his girlfriend helped him with makeup and change himself. And it's also very interesting things about Russian mentality, then sometimes very difficult to understand, and I think we need to change that. In Russian, many women feel like they have to do everything just to keep men with her. And his woman, he don't like him to change and to do the things he do. But she think if she will not help him, he will just left her and find other woman. I think it's also part that shows something wrong, wrong mentality, and something need to be changed. I don't know.
And how did you get into this community? How did they let you in?
Yeah, so first I find just one person occasionally, and then I shoot and I ask me, maybe this is a problem, I should go more with it, and he recommended me where there's community, where is some people who also feel it's like a problem, and then I come there. I choose people who probably come to me first, and yeah, even I remember after I finished this project, 2 years people didn't stop to write. There was so many want to share with it. So like, yeah, this was.
And when do you know it's time to stop for you?
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel I cannot say nothing more. Like I explore all ideas, and I don't know what else I can join to that. Maybe, yeah. This is also a very interesting person that now live in New York. He was also travesti living in Russian, but he came from a little city, and he was attacked very much because he became very talented and even famous person. He became singer, very talented singer, and creator of wonderful design of dress. And he was popular. That's why some crazy people attacked him, and he asked a refugee here in New York after some attempt to kill him, like with gun or something. That was a really crazy story about. He called himself Jaconda.
It's interesting. In some of that copy there, you have him as him or her.
This is the same guy. Yeah. So this is his work, his dress he created by himself. This is another story about guy that hopefully suicide himself. He also had the problem of not acceptance. He took a lot of hormones and do crazy things, maybe because he didn't have any support. And this is a project was filmed with a cooperation with EdCache and ICP school, because my school, Rodchenko, it was like kind of filial friend school to this one, and we did project together. So that was 5 American students come to Russia, and 5 Russian students was chosen from my school, and we went in different rehabilitation centers, and each person should choose the child, specially touch him, specially attract him. And I saw Stas first day, and I feel he's really special, and it's true. He has a very special story. There is, and hopefully very popular in Russian too. His parents was drug, very strong drug, take very strong drugs, and he have many brothers and sisters, but they all have some problems, mentally or physical. And this house especially care about children with problems like that, and they wait like help from Europe, from America, and like maybe in 2 years one child can receive some prothesis for or whatever, and they have to wait very long line. So Stas was one of the children.
So,
yeah.
I saw you mentioned EdCache.
Yes.
So can you give us a little insight into how a photojournalist like EdCache on one of his workshops inspires you? What does he do, or she do, in one of those workshops that makes you say, I'm glad I did this?
Actually, he inspired me even more after that. When I met him personally here, when he came, he gave this idea to us. So he proposed this idea to come and choose a special child, and then do common exhibition in ICP school. And then when I met him here already personally, he inspired me a lot, and I loved how he worked with other photographer, because here I mentioned like with New York Times photographers, with many editors, one day people can like hug and love you, another day they can even not say you hi, even not reply your letters. And EdCache always say, I reply everyone. And this is what I always will do, because I don't like this system. We should be open, we should be, he teach me amazing communication, to be open, to be great. And I think a photojournalist should be like this. It's not that you like choose to who reply or who communicate with. It's very important to try to share your experience, and I don't know, to not changing your mind, to stay open, something like that, yeah.
How did, I heard you say that, did you pick this boy, or was it the other way around?
Yes, I picked him, and
What is his name?
Stas. He was really special. He had this physical, he didn't have one leg, his hand was different and nose was different too, but his mind was amazing. He wasn't mind ill. He was so smart, so sensitive, and I don't know if I could show this, but I was amazed just of this 1 week. And then after our week finished, director refused me to see him again, because children can attach and something like that. But yeah, that was someone amazing. Yeah. This was actually the most long-term project, about 2 years, maybe and a half. One of the first project I did, simplicity syndrome, about people with Down syndrome, because in Russian we have a lot of community.
Would you speak up and direct it towards the...
Yes, sorry. So we have a different community. We have even the village only for the people like that let them work and create things themselves. They just try to live by themselves in own life, like make even bread and milk themselves and have some other activity. Some of them even married there and live a normal life. Like it's not easy always for them in society. First, when I started the project, I just went to different family in different Russian cities, and they was very open. And the children with Down syndrome was really particular. And I saw a lot of projects with Down syndrome, but that was so far from them, from so distant, like to show them for shocked or something. But I think they have so beautiful mind. Like in Russian, we have a wonderful word for them, like somebody who never will, how it say, lost by God. That God already take them, God already love them, and they really have something like that, like wonderful, beautiful mind. They don't know what to be offended or hate someone. Even person can hurt them, or they so beautiful and positive to them. And I wanted to show them beauty because I was amazed by that. And they was so open and they feel what I want to say. It's like all of the photos they never post. It was just a moment happened while I was with them. Like with them movement, with them speech or with them action, they like tell me the story, what they feel, what is the problem of them. I just try to follow that.
So you set up a shot like this with all the flowers there and the plants?
No, she's actually playing, and it's the same with Miro. They had their own ideas, and it was amazing. If we just come to the house of model, she will not propose you so much ideas. But that was amazing. They just with them, it was just like I'm in a story, just playing with them.
So you walked into their moment.
Yes, I mostly follow them, except maybe some couple picture. I'm not sure if I have it here. That's one I. But also she started to put flowers in the couch, and then I asked her to stand there. But it was always cooperation. I never like ordered them, and they did. Yeah.
What I was going to say is the direction, and then they can fall into that mood based on your relationship with them.
Yes.
That they find comfort.
I hope so, yes, because I felt connection. I felt connection very strong, and with the things they said, and it was some really miracles moment, some moment I will never forget that I will describe here. And that was so important experience for me, because to communicate with them, it was something special I didn't find in any communication after again. It was something amazing, and I don't know if I could show that clearly. That's a lot of different family, like with babies that just born and have this syndrome, with old men or teenager, and they create their own costumes, like angel costumes like that. They have so much artist activity and imagination. They have amazing imagination. It's something like the best painter. It's autist people, and they have also a lot of skills that difficult to understand, and it's even developed your own artist mind. I don't know. Yeah, so that's the last picture. There do the theater as well. And Vlad, he's very famous actor in Russian. He started just playing with Down syndrome circus and theater, but finally he became famous actor because he's very strong. He could not always remember the words of them, but he was so patient and so strong. So a lot of theaters start to invite him. And today he's very famous. I'm sorry. Yes, sorry. Yeah, and yeah. Yes, today he's very successful, and yeah.
So can you speak to the three different collections, right? You know, are about these people, and how did you gravitate to these three types of people, all with their own challenges or the way society looks at them with a different vision? Do you want? I mean, does it make you want to expose them to be part of our, dare I say, normal family of life? I mean, how does that fit into what you shoot?
Yeah, in Russian, it's really a problem for them to enter in society. If it's, I mentioned in Europe and here, it's easy, especially like if we tell about transvestite, it's not a problem here. That's why I specify this transvestite in Russian, because there is still the problem, and we could at least to see what's feeling these people have, if they have some suffering, how they feel about that. And some of them people have really exceptional problem, and that can become even psychical problem. And I think at least it could be a good idea to attract attention on it, to let them speak with them eyes, with them, yeah, I don't know.
But to Frank's point, are you gravitating towards people like that are just maybe not what's considered in the norm?
You can ask her questions after it's all over and let her finish her lecture.
I finished. Yes, I finished, yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to say you made your subjects look like they had a lot of pride and dignity when you shot them, and I saw that in your work, so I'm a big fan.
Thank you so much.
Strong and beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I was not so worried.
Thank you for coming.
So difficult.
Back to projections, it's amazing. It's a wonderful salon. We're going to do more of the ASMP nights. So, we do an open call to ASMP members. So look for those moments so that you have a chance to participate and present your work. It's really such an amazing opportunity to connect with, community and such. So anyway, thank you very much, and drink some more.